everybody. This is Ritva Harle here. Hi, Ritva.
Hi, Ritva.
I'm J.P. Väisänen. Welcome to Peace Countercurrent webinar. This studio, the Peace Countercurrent studio, is located at the moment in Finland, in Pori. And here with me is Ritva Harle, like I said just before, without the microphone. Hi again, Ritva, how is life?
Life is great and rainy today.
Rainy, and Ritva is wearing mask like all the year. With us in this Peace Countercurrent debate about European peace initiatives, disarmament, and future steps of civil society's peacemaking, we have Kate Hudson in London. Hi, Kate, how are you?
Fine, thanks very much. Good to be with you.
Thanks. Great that we have good connection and we can see and hear you.
Yeah.
Can Sweden hear me? In Sweden, in Stockholm, we have Agneta Norberg. Good God, how are you, Agneta?
Hello, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Hi, perfectly.
Okay, thank you.
This is very good. We have possibilities to debate about European peace issues, and I propose that we start by presentation. Presentation meaning that please tell me something about your backgrounds, activist backgrounds, and the many organizations that you work in. And by the way, we are live at Zoom and also Facebook Live. Isn't this great? I propose that we start with London and Kate Hudson. Please, introduction for everybody.
Thanks. Yes, well, I've been active in the peace movement since the early 1980s. I went on my first peace demonstration against cruise missiles when the United States wanted to bring them to Europe at that time. So I went to Greenham Common, a women's peace camp, which I think is quite well known, and also on huge demonstrations. Before the demonstrations against the Iraq War, the anti-nuclear demonstrations were the biggest in British history. I fell out of activity a little bit in the 1990s after the Cold War, because like a lot of people, I felt that somehow the problem had gone away, but we very soon realised it hadn't. And then I got back involved in CND, and we started to work in the anti-war movement after 9/11. We became a part of the big anti-war activities then. So I became involved also with the Stop the War Coalition. And then since then, over the last 5 years, as well as those things, I've also been involved in Left Unity, which is a party of the radical left in Britain, part of the European left as well. So there's great interlinkages with all three campaigns. We work very closely together, and of course, there's a huge amount still to be done. So we're very active.
This is good to hear, Kate. I think last time we met, it was in London in European Left Peace Working Groups meeting. So you are active also in the European level on the European Left Peace Working Group. Isn't that correct?
That's right, yes. I used to go to Europe to the meetings. Of course, now we have the meetings on Zoom, but we're still very active and trying to think strategically about how to advance the cause of peace.
Thanks, perfect. How about Agneta? Could you please open your position, introduce yourself and the many organizations you work with, please?
I want to introduce myself by telling about all the countries where I have been arrested and brought to the police. It shows a little bit about who I am and what I have been doing. But first, I want to thank and be very happy that you are here because, I mean, the British, oh, I forgot your name, the British, Kate, yes, oh, my memory. Because you in Britain understood that the Cold War wasn't over. So you taught me what Men with Hill was early on as chair of Swedish Peace Council and the founder of Women for Peace, and also a member of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. It fit in my understanding that the Cold War has just but a little bit faded away, but now we are in full swing, so to say. So the first time I was arrested was in the United States of America in 1996, where they conducted secretly a new nuclear test, so-called subcritical nuclear test. And the next was in Britain, where I intruded into Men with Hill. And the next was in South Korea, when I went into the base and the police took me. And last, landing in Sweden, the former neutral, non-aligned Sweden, which allow the United States of America, the most brutal warmonger, use our country as a training area. We were furious a couple of years ago. We cut the fence and went into the base where the US was training up in the north, and of course brought to jail or to investigation to the police. That's me.
Agneta, you are such an inspiration. Thank you. Is it correct that you can still find the interesting documentary film made of your activist life? Was it called shortly Agneta, and was it YouTube where one can find it?
Well, you know, I become so famous, so I don't want to brag. But actually, I'm more or less now a star, if you didn't know that. It was a film about me, Agneta, yes, but it also was a theater which was traveling all around Sweden, and I was one of the of the stars. One man actually created my role there. It was very interesting. So I have become at last the movie star, yes, which I wanted to be when I was a child. So my time has come.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Agneta, and welcome to join in our debate. And Ritva Harle, please introduce yourself and your organizations, please.
Oh,
Yes,
I started
please.
to see in my head all those trips around the places where Agneta have been that I have forgot everything because we have a so great movie star here now. But yes, I come from fund organization, and it's performances and artists for disarmament. Oh, say that word. Disarmament. Yes. And the members, they are artists and cultural workers, and we make different kind of events and happenings for peace. And in last years, we have also been working together. Today here, I have heard lots of discussion about this environmental organization and peace organizations together. And in Fund, we have been working with these climate people. What else? I'm community and environmental artist. And today I noticed that, yes, I have done it more than 30 years, so it means I'm not anymore the young one in the room. But yeah. Oh, but then let's talk more.
Let's talk. Yeah, let's talk. It's always interesting to hear new concepts. Community artist. Open a bit. What was the last artwork as a community artist you did, so that we understand a bit of your perspective?
Last one. Oh, it was environmental art I was last made, and it was in library. I thought my library is a big boat, and then I put those sailings. That was the last one in environmental. But maybe I do in this moment community art work in some way, because I have moved to, yeah, I have been moved to artist house, and there are 56 artists in our house, and I'm the, yes, and we are making lots of things, lots of happenings, and it's hard work sometimes to lead these things.
So hard work. It sounds good for activists. Later, you will open a debate on critical concept of defense.
Yes.
Agneta will open debate about the militarization of Eastern Sea and the Baltics. And we start now with Kate. And please open the debate about nuclear disarmament and the new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Would that be okay, Kate?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thanks very much. I don't know if any of you listened to the announcement at the beginning of this year by the US atomic scientists. Every year they set the hands of the doomsday clock closer or further away to midnight, where midnight stands for, catastrophic annihilation and destruction of humanity. And this year they set the hands at 100 seconds to midnight, and that's actually the closest they've ever been, even at the height of the Cold War. And when they go into quite a lot of very interesting detail about why they've set them. And the two main reasons this year were the possibilities of destruction through climate change and nuclear weapons. So they identified both of those things. And I think it underlines two things for us. I think for our movement in Britain, and no doubt elsewhere, we really are intensively campaigning for nuclear disarmament, but we're also starting to link those demands with our demands around climate change too. And just to throw in, I'm sure many of you are now linking those issues together. In Britain, CND, my own organisation, has also now become part of Extinction Rebellion Peace, specifically working on the relationship between climate change and the impact of nuclear weapons and the carbon emissions in the whole military process. So that's been a big, important thing for us. But overwhelmingly, our work is to educate and inform people about the uniquely dangerous nature of nuclear weapons and why we think disarmament is absolutely crucial. I'm sure you all know why, so I won't go into it. But of course, the radiation is a very, very key factor. And over the past few years, we've learned a lot more about what nuclear weapons would do if they are ever used again. We know about the humanitarian consequences of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but now, as a result of scientific modelling and research, we know that even a small nuclear exchange, so-called small, would result in the devastation of the growing capacity of vast swathes of the lands, of the global land. So billions of people would starve to death as a result of a nuclear exchange. So there are so many ways in which it is absolutely crucial that we get rid of nuclear weapons. I think sometimes people think they're something in the past, they haven't been used again, but they are very real presence, and their capacity for destruction is absolutely enormous. Now, of course, in a way, it's a kind of limited problem because only 9 countries actually have them. Unfortunately, the 9 countries that have them, not all of them, but most of them are the most powerful countries in the world. And they use them not always, obviously, as a military weapon, because they haven't been used again since 1945, but they use them as a political weapon to pressurize and terrorize other countries. So in so many ways, they are used on a daily basis. Now, so there's only 9 countries that have them. That shows that the global majority, the overwhelming global majority, does not have nuclear weapons, and they have been struggling for decades to get rid of them. So it's not just campaigns like CND that want nuclear disarmament, it's the overwhelming global majority of states. And for 50 years, in fact, there's been the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has been in force, which requires countries that have them to get rid of them. But of course, we know that little action has been taken. So in many ways, the global majority, which doesn't want to have nuclear weapons, has been taking action over the years for disarmament. So, for example, over half the world is self-organized as nuclear weapons-free zones. They've taken that into their own hands. The entire global south pretty much is nuclear weapon-free zones, and parts of the North, Central Asia, and so on as well. But what we've seen is that while since the end of the Cold War, nuclear stockpiles have reduced, there's no doubt about that, but the new systems which come up have much greater capacities. So although numerically there may be less nuclear weapons, the capacity for destruction is increased. And of course, we saw that, or have seen that, I shouldn't put him too much in the past tense, under President Trump. His drive to produce usable nuclear weapons, so-called, who would use them, what a crazy idea. But they have not only been talked about, they have been produced, and they are now deployed. And of course, he outlined many new scenarios in which he thinks they should be used. So there's an increasing danger in relation to nuclear weapons. So once again, we've seen the countries, primarily of the global south, working to change the situation, not just waiting forever for the nuclear weapons states to say, yeah, okay, we'll get rid of our nuclear weapons. When's that going to happen? They've actually taken matters into their own hands. And this is why we've seen this incredible new initiative called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And in the last 7 to 8 years, something like that, this has been discussed amongst countries. It's been to the United Nations. It's come on the table in the United Nations as a UN treaty. And now, last month, 50 countries have ratified this treaty, meaning that in January it will become international law. And touching on what JP was saying at the start, about the role of civil society, this treaty is a remarkable thing because, yes, it's all the states that have really led the way, but they have always worked hand in hand with civil society organisations, not only campaigns like my own, like ICANN, I'm sure Agneta's organisation as well, but also with things like the International Red Cross. There are all kinds of different organisations. So this treaty, which is going to come into force, it will become international law in January, is a kind of an expression of the will of the people from across the globe. One of the shocking things, of course, not surprising, but still shocking, is that the US and the UK in particular have been bullying countries to prevent them signing up. but it hasn't stopped 50 countries. But even like in the last few days before the ratifications came in, they were putting pressure on countries to withdraw their support. They particularly put pressure on NATO countries not to sign or get involved. And again, Agneta might have some information about the situation with her country, with Sweden, around the signing and ratification support for the TPNW. So it's a big opportunity for the movement, for the peoples. It's the first time that nuclear weapons will be illegal under international law. Unfortunately, at the moment, it will still only be enforceable for the countries that have ratified it. But nevertheless, there has never previously been a treaty which says that the possession of nuclear weapons is illegal. So this is an important step forward. And as someone was telling me the other day, an expert, it may not, in terms of how is this going to affect Britain, because Britain hasn't signed it, it will affect company decisions on investment, for example. There are many ways in which countries with nuclear weapons will be affected, even though the law will not yet apply to them. So the big challenge for us, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what people's views are, any advice and so on, how can we work to bring nuclear weapon states into the treaty, and also how can we work to bring in countries that are in so-called nuclear umbrellas like NATO? How can we actually work to ensure that the will of the people, the majority of the people, is actually expressed through support for this important new treaty for global disarmament? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. Such an important and at the moment actual opening new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Thank you for opening this debate here at Peace Countercurrent webinar. I propose that here now I make a statement to the audience in Facebook and Zoom and here in Pori, that please make questions, ask for floor and participate. And the same.
How can I ask for the floor?
And Ritva, please. Now, reactions to Kate, please. Who wishes to?
I want to make a reaction.
Please go for it.
Yeah, I protest against using the word weapon when it comes to nuclear annihilation, something, because it is not a weapon. It's a genocide. We should use some other words when it comes to nuclear genocidal tools or something. That's my intervention. What I propose, we couldn't use it as a weapon. It's not a weapon.
Something much larger. How about Ritva? Finland hasn't signed the treaty.
Yes, and it's pity, and in fact we are going to do something that Finland should sign it. But to that case, I start again, see pictures. I think that all the others are in prison. These nuclear, Agneta, weapon countries, they have put us to some kind of prison. And I think it's very unfair because we are the majority. What do you think about it, Kive?
Of course we are the majority. We are the 99% and the 1% is doing silly things. Do we have any questions in the Facebook or in Zoom? Not yet, but guess what? My idea about this conversation is a dialogue. It's an idea of dialogue. First we hear a round of interesting openings of debates. Thanks, Kate. Now we go to Agneta. And before we planned that you could speak about the militarization of the Baltic Sea and of course the Baltic countries. Is that okay, Agneta?
Yes, but I think we should discuss the nuclear weapon as Sweden has not yet signed. And I would like that a lot of peace activists would write from abroad to our government and express the utter disgust that a former peaceful Sweden has turned into a puppet for the US policy. The surrounding world should, peace activists should, I don't know, maybe they do it yet, I'm not sure, but we should have some pressure from outside to our just criminal behavior, what we have turned out to be. That's what my...
Exactly. Any comments, please? Who wishes to continue?
Jipe, can I continue?
Please, Ulla, great to hear that you are with us.
Yes, of course. I'm representing Women for Peace in Finland and also Women Against Nuclear Power, of course, because they are Siamesic twins. But to Agneta's comment, we are already, together with Women for Peace in Sweden, planning, it's really only a planning stage. But we would like to have peace organizations from Ireland and Austria. And if there would be a peace organization in Liechtenstein, that's the only EU or European countries that have signed, that they would push our governments because they have signed. They have had tough, courageous governments that have signed. And we should need these organizations from these countries to push our governments. But we will continue with that later. I will contact you.
Good.
That's a wonderful proposal. And I'm very happy that we have Women for Peace from Finland and Women for Peace from Sweden participating here in this debate. And you have such an idea for future action. I think this is the way to go. Maybe artists and performers and artists for nuclear disarmament could join the women's campaign to make pressure to the governments.
Yes, you must.
Of course, we are coming.
This is concrete. Ulla, what a great proposal. Any questions or who wishes to take the floor? Kate, how does this sound? At least Nordic women are preparing something.
Yeah, it sounds very good to me. I mean, when we were watching the whole process, over the last 3 or 4 years or so, with the development of the treaty, we were always struck by the fact that Sweden did participate in the negotiations. And so did Switzerland, and Norway, of course, was involved, because I think one of the first meetings to discuss such a thing took place in Oslo. So I'm wondering, and I think in Sweden there was a kind of an inquiry into the TPNW and whether Sweden should support it. So I'm wondering what kind of blocks were thrown up to prevent that kind of involvement all along actually turning into Swedish support and signing up to the treaty. Now, I know that we would, at CND, we would be really happy to encourage people to write to the Swedish embassy, for example, in London. But I'm wondering, how much difference does that make to a national government if they have some activists from other countries making points? Isn't it more, won't it have more weight coming from within Sweden, because that government is reliant on Swedish support to be there, to be in place, So I'm totally in favour of us showing international solidarity, but I'm sure that a powerful movement within Sweden itself will also have maybe an even bigger impact?
I think we have to do both. I know that Women for Peace in Sweden and many others are protesting against Peter Hultqvist, our Minister of Defense. But he is in the pocket of the US, and he is the one. But I'm afraid it's not only Peter Hultqvist. It's a policy in Sweden that we have left the former position. But Peter Hultqvist is the one who is blocking everything. He's very fond and loves, actually, he seemed to love United States of America. It's really a love affair, and it has gradually turned in this direction during the years. I think that all kinds of pressure is good, wherever it comes from. But also one thing I have noticed during the years, that we have a terrible mass media who is in favor of Hultqvist's position. That's where we are now.
I remember, Agneta, when we were doing the interview to promote this webinar on peace, you said something about the mass media, how difficult it is to get the other voice to be heard, or the voice of the peace movement to be heard. Could you comment something on that too, please?
Are you talking to me?
Talking to you, Agneta.
Oh, yeah. Well, one example. One of the biggest newspaper in Sweden, Svenska Dagbladet, a very prestigious newspaper. A journalist from that newspaper came home to me and made a long interview. And I put forward the things I'm now talking about, among other things. But the editor-in-chief said, this won't be printed. So it was blocked. There we are now, that these type of information I put forward are totally blocked. She was very astonished. She was asked to do a lot of interviews, and she came home to me, and then when the editor read it, it was blocked. So there we are.
Can I comment, Ipe?
For it, please.
Yes. When Kate said there should be done something within Sweden, and I'm from Finland, and in this case, I'm very ashamed of it because we didn't even take part in the negotiations. But now I'm rather affected by the Swedes, because some weeks ago they had a big advertisement in some paper. Agneta knows, I don't know which it was. 72 organizations from a very broad spectrum that went out and asked the government to sign the treaty.
Yes, you're right.
There was even a nun from some, I don't know, monastery somewhere. I was very impressed, and I would like to implement that idea in Finland. But we are very uncooperative, and now we have to start to cooperate. So can I reach out my hand? We start with this. But another thing, the foreign minister of Sweden was very involved in the treaty negotiations, and I was so happy because I thought now Sweden will lead Finland also in. But she would withdraw, and there were threats from the US that if they sign the treaty, there will be impacts, real impacts. And Margot Wallström, whom I admire, she went out in the media a year ago or what, and said that at this stage they cannot sign. But she resigned after that, which show that she was really, really under pressure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulla.
Thank you. This also brings us to the idea of activists' own media, because if we are blocked, like Agneta, you say, shouldn't we be wise and use our own media. And I'm very happy that here in Pori, I always mixing another city's name. We have one activist that wishes to take the floor. Please come and present yourself and take the floor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ritva Harle. I'm the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Finland. And I was thinking about this when Kate said that maybe it would be more effective to have a strong movement inside Sweden and not so much about the criticism from abroad. But that reminds me when we talked today earlier about these same questions about the peace and what can we do. And there was this very wise man called Jouko Jokisalo, and he said that every country has a history. And what they are doing now is because of that history, what has happened earlier. And I understand that, for example, England or Great Britain or whatever, when they are talking about their imperium when they were very strong, and they still, I think, they still have this idea of being very strong and independent. And they don't listen very much what others talk about them. But the situation is very different when we are talking about the Nordic countries. Nordic countries are not so big and strong states. We are small, and we have to listen what everybody else is saying. And I think that it would make a difference if, for example, other countries would protest and say that Sweden is doing something that it shouldn't. And I think that as Sweden, as well as Finland is a small country, they would listen. They are interested about what other countries are thinking about their policies, what they are doing. So I think that it is actually quite possible to take an effect on the Swedish politics also from abroad. They will listen. They are interested about the international opinions about Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
I want to make an objection about the small country.
Make one. Good.
No, but Sweden has not always been small. I see that their ambitions in many ways is that they want a little bit to align with big powers. Maybe that they can gain something. I mean, we have in our national anthem that we were once very big. So what are we doing in the Baltics, which I want to talk about further on? To always follow the US plans, and we are in the Eastern Sea, we are in the Baltics, and many in Estonia speak Swedish. Why do they speak Swedish? Why do they speak Swedish in Finland? Because we were there, and we are a little United States of America in the north. That's what I would add.
Perfect. When we talk about Eastern Sea or Baltic Sea, it's something that unites us. Could that be something that unites also the peace activists? But when you think of further questions, I want to give the floor also to Ritva, because according to our choreography now, you could also open a new debate on this big salad of peace that we are eating here. And it says here the credible concept of defense. What does it mean, Ritva?
Maybe it means that we have our defense. It's the Swedish system management by perkele. And now I think the defense system is management by fear. And that I hate. In my mind, I have all the time conflict because, for instance, now we have this COVID, and we have put lots of money to save people's lives, and it's important. But in the same time, we are putting so much money in this world to the weapons, and and they should kill the same people we try to save. And it makes, I just can't understand how this defense in countries can be based to mass murder, weapons and these things. It's horrible. And that's I want to discuss with you and with everybody, that is there any sense in this thing? Because I have the artist logic and I have also the women logic, and they can't be in the same time. So that we, in other hand, we save, and in other hand, we destroy. And I don't like it at all. And I think it's the question about the money. I have learned from these books, these Dekkari books, that follow the money. Always you find a murderer if you follow the money. And I think it's easy to find these murderers if we just follow the money. Where are all the money from weapons? Where they are going? Not to my pocket. They take it from my pocket. And this is, I just want a total disarmament the whole world, because we don't need the people, and everything which is living is going to be die in one day, and so we don't need these mass murder weapons to make it bigger. I think this was what I wanted to say. Was it enough?
No, it's never enough, Ritva. You always have to speak more. I think further questions to you would be that, of course, you said that you want to have a universal total disarmament. Not bad. What would you say about the Finnish system of the situation at the moment? Because I think that the bad guy that you were talking from the criminal books, the bad guy in the current situation is the Sanna Marin government that we have in the power, that is aiming to buy new air fighter weapons. Historically, with 10 billion euros, which is the biggest investment on militarization since the world wars. So please talk more. Is it okay that Sanna Marin will become the bad guy?
Yes, that's horrible, because she is so pretty-faced and young and clever, and there's also many clever people in that government, and it's the most leftist side. But now, yes, she is the bad guy in this moment and this government, and it's so difficult to understand it. I feel shame. It's very difficult to think that I have same time I'm very proud about our government, and in the same time I'm very disappointed and very ashamed, because that is so much wasting of the money, and although that we know that they should be old-fashioned weapons, because all these killing robots are coming and all these fighting Harvelis in
Drones.
Yes, all these things, they are coming, and we can't defend with these Hornets or these fighters what we are now going to buy. And from states, I don't like it at all.
I think there is one question in the social media.
Yes,
Please, I have bad knees.
Yeah, sure. Few questions from Zoom chat. I'm interested in positions of the mainstream left of Sweden on NATO and militarization of the Baltic Sea in general. Do you consider that there is anti-militarism inside the parties, or is the pro-US stance prevailing? How about the Labour Party in the UK? Do you see that the leadership of Keir Starmer has brought anything positive in this question?
Thank you, Jiri, for reading the social media questions. Would you like to respond, Agneta, Kate?
I didn't really get the exact question. Was not so easy to understand what he wanted in the. What are you asking me?
Maybe we repeat the question, but also could you respond to Ritva's opening debate on the idea of credible concept of defense? And meanwhile, maybe Kate takes the floor and then we repeat the question.
I can just reply on the question about Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. As you may know, we had a more left-wing leader of the Labour Party in Britain, Jeremy Corbyn, who is actually a vice president of CND and president of the Stop the War Coalition. So he personally had very strong pro-peace, anti-war positions, but he wasn't really, unfortunately, able to change yet the positions of the Labour Party itself. It still had policies in favour of nuclear weapons. We're in an even worse situation now, however, under the leadership of Keir Starmer. So, for example, on Thursday, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, announced that he was going to spend an additional, this is on top of the normal budget, an additional 20 million euros, or 16.5 billion pounds on so-called defence, you know, in other words, military, killing capacity. The Labour Party, they didn't say, that's terrible. You know, we need to spend that money on health provision, on dealing with the pandemic, on supporting workers and families through the economic crisis, on dealing with climate change, you know, all the things that are necessary for our real security today. Did Labour say that? No. They said, you've spent too long, you should have done this sooner. You know, and usually Labour says to the Conservative government, you have to spend more on defence, you're too soft. You know, so it's like a competition between our two main parties, government and opposition, who can be strongest so-called on so-called defence. You know, and it's a trap that Labour has fallen into, and I guess many social democratic parties across Europe and so on, that they have to look as strong as the right wing on military. And this is nothing but a trap. And I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to discuss what real security is. And I think that's a big, important narrative for the peace movement and for the left. You know, what makes people secure? It's a home, it's a job, it's an income, it's a vaccine, you know, so we need a change.
Thank you, Kate. And on repeat, Sweden question, it was about the positions of the mainstream left of Sweden on NATO and militarization of the Baltic Sea in general.
Well, sad to say, we have a left party which gradually has limited their agenda to cover health, school, elderly, and they never touch the word defense or militarization or whatever. So, and every party in our country now are crowded in the middle. So we have now a new party leader, a young, intelligent woman, and I am waiting what kind of position she will take. But I am afraid that as just a bracket now, I was excluded. They asked me to leave in the defense group in the left party. And I could see, it's many years ago, but it was a sign that we will not take in this knowledge you have. I was excluded. I was not excluded from the party, but from the, what is it called? From the group that was discussing. So eventually this group dissolved because everybody got so outraged and angry. Why do you exclude Agneta? She is knowledgeable. No answer, no explanation. I just mentioned this. This is a long development since they murdered Olof Palme. I can see that the murder of our prime minister, I don't know how, is it 25 years ago or whatever, was after this, step by step by step, the whole party and society has turned right. It's very obvious now that we, as I said, have a Minister of Defense who is in the lap of United States of America. It was the end station, and we haven't signed the Nuclear Weapons Convention, and we, without strong pressure, won't do that. So I don't think that many of our countries in the world understand how totally changed Sweden is. It's dangerous, and it is a tragedy.
Thank you, Agneta. I feel that our peace kettle is bubbling quite good, and we should add something more into it. And I think it's NATO that we are adding it. Could you, Kate, please explain a bit how you see the NATO's global expansionism?
Are you asking me?
Kate from London.
Oh, yeah. I didn't understand. Sorry.
Go into our soup of peace.
Okay, I like the soup of peace. It's great. So NATO, big problem. And this is one of the campaigns, or one of the issues that CND is strongly campaigning on. And I'm pleased to say this is an area for us of big international cooperation, because we work closely with the NATO network, which is across Europe and North America and beyond. And every time there's a NATO summit, we get active and organised. Sure, we do stuff in between, but that's when we come together. We have a counter summit, counter conference, and we have a big international demonstration as well. And because of our government's attempts always to sort of show that the UK is somehow special, and still powerful, we seem to end up with quite a few of these conferences in Britain. So we've had a couple recently, including with Trump coming. So NATO, we see NATO as an expansionist, imperialist, military, warmongering, nuclear-armed alliance. It was initiated, as we all know, during the Cold War. At the end of the Cold War, the Warsaw Pact, which was the kind of rival organisation, some people say, to NATO, the kind of balancing thing in the Cold War, that dissolved. And we all thought, good, now NATO will dissolve and we can all have a lovely, peaceful world. Did that happen? No, of course it didn't. And so quickly, NATO moved to fill the space that had been left by the Warsaw Pact. So I'm sure some of you who are old enough will remember in 1999, the first wave of NATO expansion, which took in Poland and the Czech Republic and Hungary. And then 10 days later, they found themselves at war with Yugoslavia. You know, that's what NATO means. And since then, we've seen increasing waves of expansion going into Eastern Europe. And now there are 30 countries in NATO. But what we've also seen, as well as this territorial expansion, is an expansion of their so-called mission, their NATO mission statement. And the first great change was in 1999, where it stopped being a so-called defensive organisation. It became an organisation that could have out-of-area activities, and its business was related to the whole Eurasian landmass. What happened? 2 years later, they were at war in Afghanistan, and they're still there. So that's the sort of thing that's been happening. And we've seen attempts to, well, we've seen NATO expanding not only to the borders of the former Soviet Union, but to include countries which were former Soviet republics. And we've seen NATO trying to expand into to include countries like Ukraine and Georgia, where it's a really contested issue. Okay, so we know that those countries have not acceded to NATO membership, but NATO really pushing to try and get close to Russia and to introduce its weapons systems and its missile defense. Agneta is a great expert on, you know, all those things. And of course, not only in Europe and the so-called North Atlantic. Not only that, we see NATO has 3 alliances, the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, which includes pretty much loads and loads of countries, European, that aren't in NATO already. There's the Mediterranean Dialogue, so-called, which incorporates some Middle Eastern countries, including Israel, and North African countries like Tunisia and others. And then there's the Istanbul Cooperation, which includes big swathes of the Middle East and Gulf states. You know, so that's a kind of great big expansion as well. There are also global partners too. Japan, for example, Australia, Pakistan, many other countries, I won't list them. And of course, one of the most controversial things recently was the extension of a global partnership to Colombia in Latin America. So now NATO is in Latin America, and there was last year it was discussed maybe Brazil would be a global partner of NATO. But not satisfied with expanding into Latin America, NATO is also big in Africa as well. So we have a new cooperation agreement signed this time last year with the African Union, giving NATO all kinds of rights and so on in Africa, which it usually dresses up as humanitarian aid. That's a big thing for NATO now. NATO is nothing more than a big friendly organisation to help people and get food to them when they're hungry and so on. So that's the narrative. But of course, many of us will remember the NATO air campaign against Libya, for example, in 2011. There's now a US base in Djibouti, which of course is, related. Obviously, anything US is also pretty much NATO. And that base in Djibouti is the centre of half a dozen US drone and surveillance bases across Africa. Because don't forget, bases don't have to be great big things with great big walls around them and barbed wire. You could say, look, that's a base. A US base can be a series of warehouses on the side of a normal aerodrome. So all this stuff can be there, hidden from the normal human eye. And finally, JP, just to say a word about where NATO's got its next sights on. And of course, guess where? China. Okay, so in the summer, NATO rhetoric began to increase against China. Stoltenberg, who's the Secretary General or whatever it is, he spoke of a fundamental shift in the global balance of power as a result of China's increasing influence. So he immediately thinks, weapons, soldiers, military, not great opportunity for trade, diplomatic cooperation, doing things together, culture and so on. No, war. So they see China as a military competitor, and NATO now will have an even more global role with an orientation towards the Indo-Pacific region. So that's the situation with NATO, and it is a matter for very, very great concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I'm sure that this opens many questions in the social media, and I have seen here in Tori audience that there is also one request for the floor. But I ask first Ritva and then Agneta if you wish to take the floor here.
Yeah. Okay.
Agneta, please go ahead, and then Ritva.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate, so much. But I want to underline some bases which you not mentioned, namely the Guam, which has about, I think, it's filled. It's an atoll or whatever, Guam, not far from China. So these encircling of China is going on. And the platform I would like to add is Australia, where the US have 20 bases in Australia. It's a sort of a launching pad in the coming war on China. That's what I would like to add in this context of bases and surrounding. And it's very few who understand that Japan had so many bases, and South Korea very close to China. But thank you for the important lecture.
Thank you, Kate. It was great. But last time, and thank you very much about the word killing capacity a little bit earlier, because I think with NATO, it has made its identity so that it's friendly and it's the truth and it's the defense. And yeah, this some kind of euphemism. And we have maybe to start to change the language, because the language gives power, and they have took the power with these soft words, trustful people. If we don't use anymore these defense words and these nice words, and we start to speak about this killing capacity, and if we start to use right words, maybe the identity start to be, what is that word? Naurettava.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. If we make them ridiculous and dangerous, and maybe the world should change a little bit.
Guess what, Agneta? I was missing a lot of your maps. You don't accidentally have one somewhere close to show, because Agneta is
I have it here. I have it very close. I want to show it.
But if you find one, I would be happy. Please me. But now we take the question from the audience, please. You would have to come here. Be careful in the steps. And please present yourself. Don't fall here.
So, hello, I'm Liisa Tahtinen. I'm a vice president of the Finnish Communist Party. I'd love to come back a little bit to Agneta said here today. Peace movement. In the 80s, we had a strong peace movement also in Finland.
I'm sorry, I didn't find it. I have it somewhere here, but I can't find it. I'm sorry. Mahmoud, can you look after my map? Min världskarta är baser. Den ska ligga där I vardagsrummet. I'm sorry.
Yes, we had also a campaign called the Baltic Sea, the Sea of Peace, and also nuclear weapon-free Baltic Sea. And a lot of things have happened ever since. There is no more the Soviet Union, and now Russia has also only some small part on the banks of the Baltic Sea in Kaliningrad and around St. Petersburg and Estonia.
Nej, det är min karta över baserna. Karta om baserna.
NATO countries and NATO is operating not only in Sweden, as Agneta told, but also in Finland. And the difference is that Finland has a 1,000-kilometer long border with Russia. And Finland, as a non-aligned country, allows NATO airplanes to fly very close to the Russian border. And I think it's really dangerous. And what comes to the Sanna Marin government, there was just recently they released security and foreign policy guidelines, and it has completely forgotten the old policy of security in Finland, that Finland should be non-aligned and our territory must not be used as a basis to attack to Russia. And now the only threat to Finland is, according to this, comes from Russia, and we must be ready to that. And it's something very terrible. It gives NATO is the sea, the Baltic Sea, between Finland and Sweden and Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Germany, Denmark. I think it's one of the potentially most dangerous spots where some conflicts might happen. And do you have any ideas of this? And should we really start again this campaign, revive it, to change the Baltic Sea to Sea of Peace? Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. You are also a member of the European Left Peace Working Group. But now I look at Jiri and Petra. If you have any questions there in social media, we can take them now. Or Kate, if you wish to comment. Or have we found the map in Stockholm?
Yes, I found the map, but it's so big. It's so big. So I don't know how to do it. I have this map here, but you can, if I show it piece by piece, you can understand. No, you can't see it. This is my big world map. No, it doesn't work. Here. I show it piece by piece, but it won't. No, it doesn't work. It's so big.
Difficult, yes.
So big. All bases are pinpointed here, but I can't. You can't see here.
Now we see
It's impossible. It's impossible. It's so big.
But let's tell the audience what you usually do in international events and peace events, because suddenly you go closer to the microphone and then you open the map. And it's map about US military bases, isn't it?
I don't know how to do it.
But say it with your words. You're also a talented speaker. Just give us an example.
About should I talk about it or what?
Please.
I'm not sure what you want me to do.
I have been eyewitness in several international seminars where I fell in love with you and your map, because your map opens the eyes of the US presence globally. Because once you see the Agneta map of US bases, military bases, you never forget it. That's why I was asking for it. Thank you for.
But if you have told me earlier, I could have arranged it. But it was so rapid.
I thought you travel always with the map in your purse.
Yeah.
But guess
what? Is the map.
We should continue. I think I have no hurry, but still our choreography says here that Agneta will open debate on space installations in Norway and Sweden. How about that?
Well, I have a lecture here I prepared. You asked me earlier to say something about the Baltics and about whatever. So I don't know really what you want me to do now.
I hope that you take the floor on the issues you wish to talk at the time you want to talk. No hurry, no nothing, and we can cook.
No, well, I do that. I want to hold up my book. Can you see it?
Yes.
What does it read? Can you read it?
The North, a platform for...
The North, a platform for war towards Russia. That's my book. And I would like more to understand what Sweden has transformed to be. So that's my book. And some of what I say now have I taken from this book. First, I want to show you the Baltic. A map about, no, it is impossible. Where can I? About the many bases. You wanted me to talk about the Baltic and about the North. So I want to mention some about what has happened. And Ulla Klötzer as well is very aware of these things. She used to lecture about that. But I think that it is important to understand that the Eastern Sea, which earlier was called a Sea of Peace, has now transformed into a NATO sea. That we have to have in mind. And the NATO sea goes into Finland and up into the north and down to Poland. And the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, has transformed into a launching pad to create war on Russia. And now the neighboring country, Belarus, is in trouble, and I can see with my suspicious eye that there are most of the troubles which were made both in Ukraine when it fell apart, almost in shambles, and in Georgia and in many other Eastern countries were in a way made up by something that is very, very seldom mentioned, namely National Endowment for Democracy. How many of you are familiar with National Endowment for Democracy? It's a very strong force because during Reagan administration, the CIA was so blamed for a lot of terrible things. So they said, we have to form something else, something that we can cope with, because CIA was terrible and the US was ashamed of CIA actually. So they formed National Endowment for Democracy. And what does it mean? It's William Bloom has written a book about that. He's unfortunately dead now, but William Bloom was one of the high up in the administration, but left it because he was so upset of the US policy. National Endowment for Democracy, short for NED. They form groups inside the country, mostly young people. They get mostly young boys. They get a car, they get an office, they get a computer, they get $200 or more a month. What? Because of forming a policy which can undermine or in favor of the US. That was happening in Ukraine, that happened in Georgia, and certainly it happens in Russia. So that's one of the silent enemies the Eastern country has to cope with. And I am absolutely sure that they are working very much in the Baltic states. So I'm a little bit confused of what you want me to say, because I have many things here. What I should say. So you asked me about the space installations.
Yeah, but guess what?
I will do that.
Let's ask the audience here in between if they wish to ask you something about the Baltics.
Okay.
It's interesting here.
Please do that.
Okay, or Ritva. But if not, then please go into the space.
Yes, because the Baltic is overlooked. Very few in the peace movement know almost, and yeah, I think Ulla Klötzer knows, but very few understand the important, because they are described as victims of Russia. But Russia has left the Baltic, and now the US are in Lillvarde, the base in Estonia. They have a base in Lithuania, Šiauliai. They have a base in Latvia, Lillvarde, and they have a base in Poland, which is the new country where they want to deploy national space installations. So I wanted to mention that, but tell me what to do. Should I go north now?
Let's go into the space. Lead us there, Agneta.
Should I go north?
Space.
Okay. Sweden has become a very important country when it comes to space war. How can I say that? Secretly, if I mention S-range. How many of you exactly know where this is situated? S-range. Can you raise your hand and do you know, anybody know what S-range is and where it is? Well, I'm a former teacher. I won't teach that much. I will tell you where it is. It's the world's biggest downloading station from satellites. And it is situated just a couple of miles outside Kiruna in the north of Sweden. It has silently been downloading images, mostly over Russia, to send to those who want to pay. And now S-range has changed and got millions of new Swedish kronor. For what? Suspicious as I always am, I said, what are they supposed to do now? If you read some articles one of my friends sent to me from Kiruna, this will never happen in our daily newspaper, but in Norrländska Socialdemokraten, the Norrland Social Democrat newspaper, they write some small articles about this. And I scrutinized the text and suddenly I saw, aha, for mini satellites. What is mini satellites? They will shoot up. And then I have my files in my bookshelf and there I find something. Ångström Laboratories, one of the world's most important research for space outside Uppsala in Sweden. And how many knows about Ångström Laboratories? Very few, but they make mini satellites. And what are these micro satellites? They are very small, shooting up. And for me, most after they have told about it in 2005, I found in my files. In 2005, there was an article about mini satellites. They are for war. Mini satellites are shot up to destroy which satellites? China's and Russian satellites. So there we have the new satellite war, as Bård Wormdahl has described, that most of our wars are made to destroy the installations in space. That's what Sweden has transformed into. And then you have the other important installations very close to Stockholm. Very close to Stockholm you have FRA. It is about listening on every citizen in what you can have in Sweden and in Finland and whatever. And also controlling media, computers, telephones. Well, that we can live with because they have always done that. But what I found out and why President Obama, when he visited Sweden in 2008, he visited our Prime Minister, right-wing Carl Bildt. You have heard about Carl Bildt, one of the most right-wingest leaders in the world. He was in power by that time in 2008. What did they do? They shook hands and kissed each other, certainly, and said, you can have everything we're listening in. On what? They listen on Russian military cables, which are deployed on the seas, under the sea, on the bottom of the sea. You have Russian cables. Many of them are military cables for communication. And then Carl Bildt said, of course, National Security Agency, NSA, We'll have all these informations. Where did I get that? Yeah, because who is sitting in Moscow? And we should not forget about Edward Snowden. He had done something extraordinary, and we almost forget him. We have to understand what he said. He said that National Security Agency, where he was working, is getting all Russian military information directly. That's what Sweden is now. And that's why it is such a silent. Noam Chomsky, the professor in the US, Noam Chomsky, has written a lot of books. I have one sentence from him. By the silence, you understand the importance. And that is what I want to transmit to you, is look at what S-Range is doing. Look at what Lovön, the FRA, is doing. And very close, not to you, but to the world, is the most important thing which I was familiar with when I met Duncan Campbell in Britain in the European Forum. He gave a lecture in 2005, and he pointed out Lerkil in Sweden, a couple of miles south of Gothenburg, is one of the most important part in the Five Eyes. Have you heard about the Five Eyes? The Five Eyes was formed in 1949. It was countries like English-speaking countries like Australia, Britain, US, New Zealand, and Canada. They formed something Five Eyes. What is that? Listening in on everybody and form their invisible terror society. And now Sweden is among them, together with Israel. That was Snowden told us at a lecture before he was moving to Moscow. He said, Sweden is doing exactly the same thing as National Security Agency, but they don't have that much money, but they are the same. Thank you.
Tack så mycket. Thank you, Agneta, for breaking the silence. Soon, Ritva will open the debate on how democracy is in danger. But I'm sure if you have any questions to this eye-opening presentation of Agneta's, please take the floor. Ritva or Kate or the audience, now you can comment and ask further questions on the S-range and mini satellites and things that Agneta said that we should break the silence.
I see that Kate had raised her hand.
Agneta, it doesn't surprise me very much because this is technology time. I think this is the new normal in some way also. And I think maybe it's more dangerous, these satellites and this world with this technology. In some way we don't, maybe in future, it's not necessary to use these old-fashioned type of weapons. Those weapons should be, they should destroy our data and go to our nets and destroy it. And it was very important to hear what you were talking, because this is the threat, really threat, not a NATO country concretely, in a very concrete way. If terrible things could happen in net.
Kate, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks to you, Agneta, for the work that you've done around this. And obviously, there are huge links to our campaign in Britain against the listening stations and so on. There's GCHQ, and of course their relationship to Fylingdales and Men with Hill. And I just wondered what you thought about the prospect for wars in space, because as our chair, Dave Webb, who you know very well, is always telling us, you know, there are all these technologies are dual use technologies, and every kind of satellite that's for a TV station or whatever, there's potential not only for surveillance, but also for a role in war fighting. And we've seen President Trump talking about, you know, space war is the next frontier. And our Prime Minister, when he was announcing the big spending on so-called defence on Thursday, he also announced that he was launching a new British Space Command that would be capable of launching a rocket in 2 years' time. So that is obviously a kind of war fighting perspective. So do you see this as very much linked to war fighting, and what do you think is the prospect of war taking place in space?
Well, I think I would like to say something about the language, because when I talk, I have to change in a way my language, because we are fed up with fancy movies about space, fancy ideas about space. So I never use the word space, because then the brain think I am sort of science fiction, fairy tale talking. I try to talk about that we at least know something about. I used to bring my mobile telephone and say, I would never be able to speak in this telephone if it wasn't for something is swirling around the globe, the satellites. And then people start to use their brain in another direction. It is not this space fancy movies. Oh, the mobile telephone, I know about that. And I would never be able to speak to anybody without satellites. Then you have come to a step further. Then the second step is to say, this did we receive from the military, because they are already in space. So you have to try to find out how to deal with this, because I knew this in 2001, and I have been talking and talking and talking and talking, and I am still talking. And it is sort of, they talk like this. They talk about NATO. Yes, because NATO and space are like this. If you talk about the militaries and forget that who is the arena, it is space. So we should never speak first about space and then about NATO. We have to talk about them as one, because all wars today are fought with the help of space. And it's not something as fairy tales, it is. So then I used to use the word satellites, because then I understood how they could launch a war via Svalbard up in the north towards Iraq. It was the first space war in 1991, because it was a sandstorm and the pilots couldn't drive their tanks and they didn't see anything. They couldn't kill so many people they wanted because the tanks was filled with sandstorm. What did they do? They called, of course, Pentagon and said, this doesn't work. What did Pentagon do? They called Svalbard. The satellite downloading station. And then the problem was solved because Pentagon had a satellite above Iraq, and then Svalbard could send their information via Pentagon and via the satellite, so the pilots could get direction in their tanks. Did you get me? Did you understand what I said now? Yeah. So we have to talk in a better way to make it understandable, because talking about this space issue has, at least for me, been not fruitful. But it's also important to mention, if you are in Sweden, point out what is important in space. If you are in Finland, I'm not sure where it is, but certainly it is in the north. And if you are in Britain, of course, I've been in Manwith Hill and I've been arrested there. So I understand, but that's what be my contribution in this session. Everything in war is made by the help of satellites. That is my credo. Thank you.
Thank you, Agneta, and we won't be silenced. And Ritva, why is democracy in danger?
I think it's a direct link from Agneta's speech to what I think about. Because I think that power is nowadays big companies which has overgrowth, and the power is, it sounds like somebody should take my mind. They are listening to me. They are manipulating me. When I'm using social media, they have all their logarithms. They calculate what they are going to give to me, what I should see, and I hate it. I hate it because I never know, I never can know, do I really think like this way, or have somebody put this idea to my mind, and these companies are doing it to everyone who is in social media. And also those companies are nowadays so huge, and there's no democracy in it and in this company. Again, follow the money. That's the big question, of course, the money. And these normal elected democratic countries, they have lost their power because of these big companies. And that's, I think, it's dangerous. I think for instance, I'm two-minded, because in the other hand, I see those possibilities, for instance, what social media is giving to us. But in the same time, I'm afraid about it, what it's doing to ourselves and our mind. Yeah, and I think the democracy is in danger. And also it's danger in democratic countries, because, for instance, those elections has came so expensive that normally people, they can't go to elections. They don't have money. They have now, for instance, in America, it's a great country, yes, and they have put milliards, not milliards, millions, billions to this election. And also in Finland, those elections are costing so much. But again, we have the social media, but how people can find the information if those logarithms are working against us? Okay, please, I just want to discuss about this thing.
Great, thank you for opening this. Maybe we need peace logarithms. Anybody wishing to take the floor here? What about democracy? Why it's in danger? Thank you, Ritva, for opening this important issue here. In the last, what do we have, 20 minutes of our debate, peace countercurrent broadcast from Pori, Finland, participating. Ritva Harle here, Kate Hudson in London, and Agneta Norberg in Stockholm. No sense that social media has any questions for us, maybe comments from democracy, from Agneta or Kate, please.
Are you asking me? I didn't get it. Did you ask me something?
Don't worry, Agneta, we are talking about democracy. If you wish to say your comments to Ritva Harle's opening about democracy, please feel free.
Oh yeah, it was rather difficult for me to understand what she said, because she had something in her mouth, around her mouth, so I hardly understood what she said. Well, what is now, we can see it during this pandemic. What are we exposed to? There is something going on under the surface. I'm not sure if it is democratic, but I'm absolutely sure that there are certain powers, specifically the military, which take the opportunity to do something during this time when we are locked down. We haven't been speaking about the lockdown here, but I am very afraid what is really going on under the cover of the pandemic. I don't say that the pandemic is made up. They are terrible, and Sweden is very bad hurt. But I'm absolutely sure that the military has not taken any pause. Have you done that in Finland? Do you know anything about that in Britain? What the military is doing during this time, talking about democracy. That's what I would like to say, because I don't think that democracy function actually. We can see it in the election in the US. It's a shame that that you must be a billionaire to be a candidate for the presidency, and then we see what it is. So we have to be very, very carefully what is happening in our country when never, ever military is brought in to any discussion when we talk about democracy. It's never mentioned. So there it is excluded. That's what I would like to say.
Thank you, Agneta. Kate, please.
Thanks. Yeah, just before I make my comment about something that really struck me about what Rivka was saying, just in response to Agneta's points, it is interesting that remember Defender Europe 2020, the massive kind of mock US invasion of Europe, which was set to take place from February through for several months, you know, with 30,000 US troops coming to Europe. I mean, it was definitely a kind of, well, a kind of practice invasion of Europe. Because of the pandemic, that was largely called off. You know, so the pandemic has had an impact on some of these things. So it's not that they have just had business as usual. And Agneta, I would like to solidarize with you, coming from Sweden, where we know that your government has pretty much gone with the herd immunity idea, which our own Prime Minister Boris Johnson tried to pursue. You know, let the virus run riot through the population and then everyone will get a natural immunity. And it was because our government, influenced by far-right advisors, took that view. They lost like several weeks where they should have put Britain into a lockdown. And as a result, we have over 50,000 deaths, you know, and it's countries that have either actually done what the countries in the Far East have done and really knocked it on the head immediately and then test and trace. I mean, our government was even telling us for a long time it was a bad idea to use face masks. You know, these are the criminals, you know, people who haven't taken it seriously. And I think any conspiracy theories, you know, about pandemic or any suggestion that people shouldn't use vaccines, it's an anti-science Trump conspiracy. That's what that is, you know. Just, I mean, you see what's happened in the US, it's a complete disaster. But in terms of military stuff, one of the really interesting things that happened in Britain was that the government started off saying, oh, we're having this terrible crisis. We haven't got enough equipment. We need more ventilators. And so they asked one of our vacuum cleaner companies, Dyson, to make ventilators. And of course they couldn't do it, and they tried a few other companies, and eventually they turned an initiative was started up by 30 big companies, industrial production companies, which included arms manufacturers and even nuclear weapons manufacturers, and they started to produce ventilators. And because the workforce is highly skilled, they were able to do this. And actually, we've known for a long time that the people who produce nuclear weapons submarines in Britain, they can easily transfer to producing kidney dialysis machines and so on. So what we learned was that far from defence diversification being a kind of utopian fantasy, if the government wants to do it, it can do it in a matter of weeks. You know, and people who normally were working otherwise on producing nuclear weapons submarines in Barrow shipyard, they were sent to work at home producing protective equipment on 3D printers at home. You know, so there are so many ways, if there's a political will to do it, these things can be done. And I think that this has very much shown us what is possible. You know, the whole pandemic experience has opened the door to how things can be different, you know, that we don't have to go along with the status quo. And then just on what Rivka was saying, I mean, it made me think on the question of democracy. You know, people talk a lot about political democracy. And yes, political democracy is important, but it is not going to do it without economic democracy. You know, that is absolutely fundamental, and we have to change the ownership and control of production and distribution and exchange, as the old formula is. But within our societies, there has to be economic democracy as well as genuine political democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. There is now a surprise number here. Could you please hold the microphone for me? This is the flag of Western Sahara.
Oh, I've been there.
Morocco is occupying Western Sahara for more than 40 years.
Yeah, since
Now,
1975.
last Friday, 30th of November, Moroccan forces attacked civil Sahrawi people in Gergerat. Now I'm asking you, all the participants of this Peace Countercurrent webinar, if there is any solidarity. Who wants to take the floor? Ritva.
Yep. Can I say, yeah?
Agneta.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Just go ahead. Go for it, Agneta.
Yeah, I was in the camps where the refugees are 3 times, and it was extraordinary strong experience. And I agree with you that this is almost but forgotten. But so I'm glad I just shook when you saw the flag, because I know the flag and what is it about Western Sahara here? So it's really important what you say. And I wanted to add that the women in Polisario and in the desert, they have shown what women can do But how long will they be there in the desert? It's really so tragic, but they are so brave and resist but silenced in almost the entire world. So I'm glad that you brought this up. But what should we do? Should we just now from this meeting demand that Morocco, and by that because the US and France is supporting the occupation, we shouldn't forget that, and we should also point to the fact that Western Sahara, where the Morocco is the part Morocco is occupying, is the world's biggest mine for phosphate. It's an important part in many. So we have to see always when countries are occupied, what is under the soil? Is it oil? Is it iron? Is it whatever? In this case, it is phosphate, the world's biggest mine of phosphate. Like Bolivia, you have another thing there, but it is important things we should point to. So thank you very much for this. I get so warm because I was there several times.
Great. We are running out of time. Kate, please. Is there any solidarity?
This is a struggle that many people in Britain feel very strongly about. And in fact, it's one of the struggles which actually Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, introduced me to many years ago when I was unaware of it. And it's one of the causes which he holds very dear. And I think that the more we can do to raise solidarity and to raise awareness, the better. You know, it's a very important struggle.
Yes, of course, there's solidarity. And we have even started to work with West Sahara. You can tell about more about it yourself.
Now we have just a little time to make a short round trip again. Finland, Sweden, UK. Where are you inviting activists? What is the next step? Ritva, where do you invite us?
24th January to somewhere, because we demand that we have to sign this ydinsulkusopimus.
Nuclear treaty agreement.
Yes.
Agneta, where should we go next? The activists, we are not silenced and we don't sit on the sofas. What is the next action?
I really don't know. I don't think we have any specific action.
I don't believe you.
In our country. But we have to get rid of nuclear weapons. We have to do everything, but we have not. I don't think I have in my mind now what date we should connect. I'm sorry, I don't have it.
Don't worry, in the short future we will be in touch again. Kate, what is the next action besides the European Forum, I think?
Yes, well, going into the new year, the big focus for CND, for the peace movement in Britain, is the 22nd of January. This is 2 days after the US presidential inauguration, so we'll have a big job to raise the profile in the media. But the 22nd of January is the day on which the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons comes into force. It becomes international law. And we in Britain will be we're having a big parliamentary lobbying process to lobby all our MPs, to raise awareness, to try and get it on the agenda of the UK government. And I'm sure that comrades throughout the world where your governments haven't already signed up to support the treaty can do this same process. Every country, every government needs to know that it should be supporting international law, not going against it. And we will have some online events around this in January. So if anyone would like to participate in our webinars, please do visit the CND website and we'll be delighted to welcome you.
Thank you, Kate, for the good invitation. I think this debate shows that it's not only necessary, but it's also refreshing to collectively debate about these peace issues, because it charges activists' batteries, absolutely. And it gives new ideas where to go together and how to form strengthen coalitions. I think we need to influence here, because we are sending this from Finland, that we are going to be stronger fighting against the air fighters deal that is happening in the very high north in Finnish government at the moment. But then, in the end, I say 15 times thank you. And please listen carefully. I say thank you for European left unity, campaign for nuclear disarmament, stop the war coalition, Swedish Peace Committee, Women for Peace, Kvinnorna för Fred, Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power Space, No to Nato in Sweden, Performance and Artist for Nuclear Disarmament, Democratic Civic Association, siis Demokraattinen Sivistysliitto, Communist Party of Finland, tiedonantaja, panelists, Kate Hudson, Agneta Norberg and Ritva Harle, and Zoom organizers, Jiri Mäntysalo and Petra Pakkalen and Tiina Sandberg, and the audience present here in Pori and everywhere in Zoom and Facebook and social media. Thank you, kiitos, rauhaan eteenpäin.
Thank you.
Thank you.